Condemnation and anger aimed at Israel's prime minister. Will killings in Gaza deepen a divide within the international community? I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmaker is the spat over deadly protests in Gaza. The Israeli military has faced international backlash for opening fire on demonstrators in Gaza, with troops killing dozens of Palestinians. One of the most critical voices has been Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who called Israel's prime minister a terrorist. Benjamin Netanyahu defended his soldiers with a tweet describing them as the most moral army in the world. But many call that into question this week when a video emerged showing an Israeli sniper celebrating after shooting a Palestinian. In a moment, I'll ask Israel's ambassador to Turkey how his government defends their military's conduct. But first, this report by Sandra Gatman.
They call it the Great March of Return. A demonstration by thousands of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip demanding their right to land seized by Israel. For 2 weeks, they've burned tires and waved flags, but what was intended as a peaceful protest quickly turned deadly. More than 40 Palestinians have been killed, and around 1,400 have been seriously wounded. Once again, violence in Gaza has become a war of narratives. Israel says it's attacking members of Hamas who have used the protests as a smokescreen to wage terror attacks in Israel.
The attack is a response to an incident along the Gaza border yesterday in which Hamas apparently attempted to breach or infiltrate
the security fence into Israel and managed to set ablaze a military engineering vehicle.
But Palestinian protesters say they're being targeted indiscriminately. Their wounds, many of them gunshots to the leg, have left some disabled for life. Israel is facing growing international calls to stop using deadly force.
Israel must uphold its responsibilities under international human rights and humanitarian law. Lethal force should only be used as a last resort, with any resulting fatalities properly investigated.
There's also pressure on the government to explain the deaths of Palestinians like Yasser Murtaja, a photographer who was shot wearing a flak jacket and press helmet, and explain videos like this. Last year, a Palestinian man was shot by an Israeli soldier who celebrated while filming.
Yes!
The video has caused an uproar online. Israel's defense minister Avigdor Lieberman has praised the sniper, saying he deserves a medal and the photographer deserves a demotion. Violence in Gaza has only renewed tension that's long simmered in the Strip, and it's only set to heat up. On the 14th of May, Israel will celebrate 70 years since its founding, an anniversary the Palestinians are preparing to mark with more protests, and Israeli soldiers will be poised to respond. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now is the Israeli ambassador to Turkey, Eitan Nair. Sir, it's a pleasure having you on set on The Newsmakers. Thanks for coming to Istanbul.
Thank you, my pleasure.
You must have a tough job, and I'll tell you why. We have Turkish President Erdogan saying your Prime Minister Netanyahu is a, quote, terrorist. You're still allies on paper, still a relationship between the two nations. We have Prime Minister Netanyahu biting back on Twitter, talking about Syria and the like, and talking about killing civilians, and that Turkey should not be lecturing Israel on morality and values. How hard or how much harder does that make your job being Israel's man in Ankara?
First of all, I was very glad to be chosen and honored to be Israel's ambassador to Ankara. Turkey-Israel relations are my passion. It's my second tour in Turkey. I was here during the 90s. Different times, different type of relationships. I was a second secretary, a spokesman of the embassy. The role of every diplomat is to look for what brings us together, not what separates us. And my job here is exactly that. I'm coming here to this interview from meetings, a series of meetings in the morning, through the morning and lunch with top businessmen in this country, and all telling me we want to do business with Israel. We want to come to Israel. We were in Israel. We visited Israel. We wanted to take our families to Israel. We want to do business with you. We understand your language. You understand our language. We think the same. And I think as a diplomat, my first and foremost mission is to bring our countries together, to build trust. Difficult, not easy, but possible. I've seen it happen before.
But when one's saying terrorist and the other one's saying butcher, how do you bring the two together at all?
You know, there are two peoples here. There are the Turkish people and the Israeli people. Turkey is still the top destination for Israelis. Passover, past. And Turks like Israel, those who come to Israel for the first time. Yesterday I met in the embassy a Turkish researcher who went to Israel for the first time. These are the things, these are the ingredients that make me hopeful, no matter what is the current weather, that for the long run, or even for the medium to long term, relations will pick up, trust will be rebuilt. We have a lot in common, a lot of things that we see eye to eye, or should see eye to eye, a lot of common threats. We eventually want the same thing. How together is a different question.
I think that's affecting the weather, and the thing that President Erdogan was directly referring to when he mentioned that was the situation on the Gaza border. So more than 40 Palestinians killed, more than 1,000 wounded. Was it justified?
Depends how you term the word justified. Every death, every injury, every tear that is shed is regretful. We don't come, we don't want our sons to kill, and we don't want to get killed. We have interests to protect, we have a security, our borders. And here in Turkey, you asked me before about the difficulty of my job. I feel that here in Turkey sometimes the job is easier when I remember that Turks, like Israelis, honor the borders, the security of the borders, their own security. They know how to fight threats against their own security. They know how to repel terrorists and terrorism. Turkey, like Israel, fought terrorism for many years. And this is what we feel that we are doing. Gaza is controlled by Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas wants to destroy Israel. Today in Israel, we mark the Holocaust Day, a remembrance day for 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust. It started with words, with let's destroy, let's kill, let's annihilate the Jewish people. And 1/3 of my people were annihilated. My generation grew up on the notion of never again. We will never let anybody annihilate us, destroy us. We will protect our borders, protect our sovereignty, protect our independence. And I feel that when I talk to Turks, they actually understand what I'm talking about. They understand what is fighting against terrorism. You fought terrorists. At times we help you fight terrorism. And we are fighting terrorism.
When we talk about Holocaust Remembrance Day, one of the most egregious acts in history, the Holocaust, one of the things that comes to mind is to say, well, if there are among the Palestinians people who say terrible anti-Semitic things, does it justify military occupation, besieging Gaza, air blockades, land blockades, sea blockades, snipers killing innocent civilians? Does it justify killing Palestinian civilians because among Palestinians, there are some who are laced with anti-Semitism?
I don't think the question here is laced with anti-Semitism or whatever they say. It's not what they say, it's what they do. It is what they say when they come and say, our mission is to destroy Israel, is to come instead of Israel. My country is the only country, it's not just the Palestinian Hamas who said that, it's not just Hamas, it's also Iran. We want to destroy Israel. Nobody can stay calm.
We're not talking about the Iranians.
Nobody can stay indifferent to such threats. Now, is it just mere words? No. More than 1,000 civilians, Israeli civilians, were murdered in the streets of Israel, in restaurants and buses. So these are not just mere words. This is not anti-Semitism.
And these are condemnable actions, right?
And this is terrorism.
So this is killing. But my question to you is, out of the 30,000 or so people who were protesting or more, are you absolutely convinced that these were anti-Semitic Palestinians hell-bent on destroying Israel?
It's not the question. And the question is if they want to protest peacefully, and whatever the protest is, and whatever the issue is, they can protest peacefully. They can stand away from the border. They can gather together. They can chant. They can sing songs. They can have their weddings, or whatever they need to do. When you run amok to the border, when you sabotage the fence, when you throw firebombs, when you lay IDEs or mines or fire at soldiers, you will be responded. Israel said time and again, we will protect our sovereignty, we will protect our border. So when you want to have peaceful demonstrations, and we know what peaceful demonstrations are and how they look like, this was not those who ran to the border, those who ran to the fence.
Can you account for all of them? All those people who were killed and all those people who were injured were throwing bombs at your soldiers?
Look, the Israeli army is one of the most moral armies. Nobody shoots at will, at his own will.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, there are procedures in place.
You're saying this at the same time a video's just come out showing snipers killing an unarmed Palestinian or shooting an unarmed Palestinian. And I apologize. He wasn't killed. I'm not sure if he was killed.
No, he was wounded.
22nd of December, right? Snipers shooting an unarmed Palestinian. Wow, what a video, that son of a whore. Wow, they hit someone in the head. That's one of the soldiers. Unarmed. Your defense minister saying the sniper deserves a commendation, the photographer a court-martial. You're not only representing your prime minister, you're representing your defense minister. We're watching this video of Israeli snipers taking pot shots at Palestinian unarmed civilians. And you're telling me one of the most moral armies in the world. How does that square?
Because, as we said before, we reached an agreement, a ceasefire agreement. We set a perimeter, and we said all those who cross the perimeter, who run towards the border, who put the border fence, the border security, our security. We have tens of thousands of Israelis living in communities along the border.
Even if you're unarmed?
Tens of meters from the border. When you run to the border, when you threaten the security,
you will expect to be shot.
Warned, there are procedures in place, warned, and if you don't stop, you will be shot. Israel said it time and again, warned that it will do that, and warned those people.
Even if
they're not just
unarmed,
being shot, they're not being...
Not seen as a threat.
It is a threat. It is
unarmed.
a threat. A threat. People run amok to the border, people throwing Molotov cocktails, people carrying weapons.
Without a Molotov cocktail, without a weapon, just walking towards the border, you'll be shot.
And why to walk across towards the border?
Well, I don't know. I can't get into their psychology. I'm not a Palestinian living in Gaza, caged inside
The question
Gaza.
is this. Do you want to live with peace with Israel, or do you not? If you want to live in peace with Israel, stop telling, stop chanting, stop educating your people, stop inciting your people to hate and destroy.
These are peaceful protests. If people are just walking towards the border...
Who said it was peaceful? Why peaceful?
Do you have evidence that these people were armed?
Of course.
All of them?
Of course.
All of them deserve to be shot and killed and injured?
The majority of those shot were either active members of the military wing of Hamas. And you have to understand again, Hamas is being treated by Israel the same way as any other terror organization is treated, whether it's PKK or Hezbollah or Daesh. This is a terror organization.
And that's understood. That's the Israeli viewpoint of Hamas. Let me ask you about Yasser Murtaja, the journalist. So here's a man. He's wearing press. He's wearing the flak jacket. He's got a camera, clearly unarmed, shot dead during the demonstrations. Was his killing regrettable?
Every killing is regrettable because the cause of death...
I didn't ask you if every killing was regrettable. Was his killing justified?
Under investigation.
It's not under investigation, actually.
It is under investigation.
It's under investigation.
The Israeli, obviously. The Israeli army investigates. High-level officer, a brigadier general, was appointed to investigate all cases whenever somebody is being hit.
This is news to me because, as far as I understood, it was not being investigated because Avigdor Lieberman said the man was a Hamas operative. Your defense minister again.
He said that. He said he mentioned his rank. He mentioned what he did. But nonetheless...
Do you believe your defense minister?
In the Israeli, yes, of course. The Israeli army has procedures in place. Every time a person is being hit, injured or died, an investigation is opened. Soldiers are questioned. This is, as I said, a moral army. We don't shoot in order to kill for fun.
So there will be an investigation?
Of course. And we also said, and Israel said, that the soldiers' reaction was below what is required, what is expected from soldiers in the Israel Defense Forces.
So it was regrettable?
He died. Every death.
But you agree with the defense minister that he was a Hamas operative?
I wasn't there. I don't know him personally. So I believe my defense minister. Let's wait for the investigation to be carried out.
I want to ask
let's wait for the results. I can promise you one thing.
Okay.
I can promise you one thing. Since we hold these investigations are carried out with the judicial oversight. They are under judicial review in Israel.
And that's
I
good.
think that's
Checks
what
and
you can
balances in
expect.
society. That's great.
Absolutely. It's not what society is being judged by its morals, by its values, and the way it keeps its moral and values. And I think that this is what we do.
Okay. So Murtaja was vetted by the US State Department. Did you know that?
Yes.
He got a grant of $11,700 from USAID, the US State Department. Do you trust the vetting process of the US State Department?
I trust one thing. We will hold investigations. We will come to a conclusion.
Do you
and
trust
we
the
will
Americans
publicize...
to vet a Palestinian in Gaza?
I'm not an American spokesperson. I don't know what they do in order to vet. That's not my job to set. I'm saying one thing. As an ambassador, as an Israeli, I trust my government.
Certainly.
I trust our judicial process, our due process. I trust our military, which I trust procedures in place. I trust our rules of engagement, that every case will be investigated, conclusions will be made, are made, and we'll continue to defend our borders, defend our sovereignty, and fight terrorism. The Gazan people have a choice.
Can I ask you, before we go to what you feel the Gazan people should choose, what is more likely, that this guy was Hamas and that the State Department gave a grant of almost $12,000 to a Hamas operative, a senior Hamas operative, whose rank your defense minister knows, or that he's a journalist and your defense minister's lying?
What do you think my answer will be?
I don't know. Tell me.
I am waiting for the result of the investigation.
Is it likely that the US State Department would give a $12,000 grant to a Hamas operative?
I don't know what the answer to such a question is. I'm not speaking for the Americans and their vetting procedures. I'm saying one thing.
All the evidence seems to suggest he was a journalist. The Norwegian Refugee Council hired him. Do you think they hire Hamas?
I am waiting for the result of the investigation.
If the result shows he was a journalist, what would your answer be?
I think that if the result shows, it's a hypothetical question. I'm waiting for the end of the investigation.
Would you
to
apologize?
be able to say, I think that we apologized in the past and mistakes can happen. The question is not whether mistakes cannot happen. Nobody said everybody is perfect. The question is how you react. And I said time and again, the question is much bigger than that. We are facing a threat to our border security. No country, including this country,
certainly, but I mean, again, and you give the analogy, Turkey does not control the airspace or sea space or blockade any of its neighbors, so the context is different, right? You'd agree that the context of Gaza is different to Syria and elsewhere.
If you have time and to go over the issue of Gaza and why Gaza is in its situation, let me tell you one thing that I learned when I was a very young diplomat. Whenever you point a finger at somebody, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. And the question is, with your permission,
the same as anything that Turkey is
with
facing?
your permission, let me just finish. With your permission, the question is, what is the Gazans' contribution to this situation? When Hamas took over Gaza and overthrew the legitimate governance of Gaza at the time, which was the Palestinian Authority, abolished the passages, the border passage agreement with Israel, when Gaza continued to be controlled by a terror organization. Hamas is a terror organization.
And we've had them in this seat. I've been to Gaza to talk to them. So, from my perspective, I hold them to account when I talk to them, and I'm holding you to account when I talk to you. Is that fair?
It's fair to hold an account when we know the whole story, when we know the whole picture, when we have all the details. I'm not going to comment on what the media says, what the Norwegian official says, and with all due respect to our American friends, what they did or didn't do. I trust my country, I trust our authorities, I trust our due process, that the investigation will be carried out, and we'll see the results.
Okay. Let's look ahead a little bit, just before we end, because we're almost out of time. Mid-May, for you, independence. For Palestinians, Nakba, catastrophe. Competing narratives, competing history. There's a commemoration, there's an anniversary. Things have been heating up right now. Clearly they're going to heat up then because Donald Trump decides he wants to move the embassy to Jerusalem against the wishes of much of the world. You would accept that as a diplomat. That's fact. Isn't it in Israel's interest to stop killing protesters in the build-up to what can be spectacular violence almost in May?
I don't think it's a right question. I don't think it's a fair question. I'll tell you why.
How should I have asked that question?
I don't know. I'm not the interviewer here. But I'm saying this. Israel was established in 1948. It was established in war, very much like Turkey. Your war of independence, our war of independence. I'm not comparing situations. I'm saying that Israel was born. Israel is a fact. Israel exists. Its right to exist is unquestionable. It's a natural right. Accepting it or not accepting it, Israel has the right to exist. Israel exists. Simple. Israel celebrates its 70th anniversary very soon.
Should Palestine exist?
We recognized the Palestinian right for self-determination. We are still waiting for the Palestinians to accept the Jews' right for self-determination.
Do you accept the commemoration and the pain of those who were evicted from their homes? And whether it's going to be a political reality or not, don't quite feel like celebrating Israel's independence because they have the title deeds to homes that other people have right now. And they live in places like Gaza or occupied in the West Bank. In principle, do you accept that?
You know, the question is this. We have history. We have the past. I cannot change the past. None of us can change the past. The only thing I can change, we and the Palestinians together, is our future. So we can sit down and dwell about the past, each with their narrative, arguing until we turn blue about the past, or look together the future, argue about the future, how to make our future better, how to make the future of our children and our grandchildren better.
But isn't there a power dynamic here, a power imbalance here? Because only one side is militarily occupying the other. How about the occupation ends, and then you can talk as equals?
One answer. Let's sit down and talk. Israel withdrew from Gaza. Israel withdrew from Sinai. Every time we withdrew from a place, it became a launching ground for missiles that were lobbed at Israel. You want to make peace with Israel? Sit down and make peace with Israel. You will find the Israelis thrilled with the thought of peace with their neighbors. What we will not and will never compromise is our security, our existence, and our sovereignty. This is something which, again, being here in Turkey, I think that every Turk identifies with these 3 things. You are a proud nation, you keep your border secure, you fight terrorism, and we are no different than you.
So why is it so difficult to convince President Erdogan that these are similarities?
one thing will persuade everybody, and this is reality. And the reality is that we should sit together. We have done so in the past. I was here during the 90s, during the Camp David, the Oslo process, the Camp David talks. We spoke peace. We tried to build a future. If we sit down again, without preconditions, to talk about our future, not about the past. We can argue about the past once, maybe, in the future, when everything is settled. Let's build a future together. And in that, everybody should join. To that wish, everybody should join. Because I'm sure that everybody here in Turkey, in the US, in Europe, everywhere, whoever watches us now, joins me with this wish. If you want to make peace, sit down and make peace with your enemy, as long as you accept that your enemy, that your opponent, the person, the nation on the other side, has the same rights as you. We accepted the Palestinians' right for self-determination. We are waiting for the Palestinians still to accept the Jews' right for self-determination. You cannot demand your rights by avoiding, by preventing somebody else's rights. That's a simple truth. From there, we can move forward, we can move to the future to build a better future.
Ambassador Eitan Naeh, I thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Still ahead on the program, the EU's bailout fund for Greece runs out in a matter of months. We look at whether it's helped or hurt the country. Time is running out for Greece's bailout plan, which expires this August. It's been 8 years since Athens accepted the $100 billion EU rescue fund in exchange for tough austerity measures. But was it the right move? Critics say the country is worse off now than it was before. But Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras says his economic reforms have been a huge success. So, whose truth will prevail when the clock strikes midnight on August 31st? Shoaib Hassan reports.
It may be the end of a long famine for Greece. The stringent conditions attached to bailout programs keeping the country's economy afloat for the last 9 years are being rolled back.
There are no further conditions at the end of the program, no further restrictions. And the monitoring that will take place, the post-program monitoring, is simply an early warning system to alert the institutions and the other member states if things were to go wrong. It's standard procedure, but it's no more than that.
Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras says the economy's recovered, something he's claiming credit for. But many Greeks are still frustrated by how slow the recovery has been. Greece has been lent more than $260 billion since 2010, but the economic recovery only began with a 1.4% growth rate in 2017, falling short of the forecast 2%. That's after net wealth for Greeks had decreased by 40% since 2010. Unemployment stands at 25%, while the poverty level has risen to 15%. That's something that continues to anger Greeks. They believe the conditions attached to the bailout were too stringent and have choked economic growth. It especially disillusions younger generations. Many are now abandoning dreams of making it here and leaving for other countries.
This is unfair for everyone, for all the youth who are all unemployed, but nothing will come out of this now because what's done is done. The decisions have already been made and we can't turn back.
Greece's former finance minister Yanis Varoufakis has launched a political party to stop this brain drain. In the latest episode of TRT World's documentary series Crossing the Line, Imran Garda asked Varoufakis about his doubts regarding the recovery.
Fitch and the other credit rating agencies look at Greece and they think, okay, the Greek state, and they say, okay, they now have an agreement with the Troika, and in particular with 1/3 of the Troika, which is the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank is now standing behind parts of the Greek debt. Why? Because it is politically expedient for the Troika to celebrate the Greek success story. Is there a Greek success story? That's something Fitch doesn't care about.
So, is the cost of the Greek success story too high? And can the damage it's caused to the country's socio-economic fabric be repaired? Shoaib Hassan, the Newsmakers.
Well, let's go to our panel in Athens. Joining us is Greek financial journalist Menelaos Tsafalias, Anastasia Giamali, who writes about global political and economic affairs, and Nikolaos Vetas, the General Director of the Foundation for Economic and Industrial Research in Athens. I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers. Menelaos Tsafalias, let me begin with you. 8 years of bailouts and austerity. This was a dance with the Troika between the Greek government, the Greek people and the Troika. Has it worked out okay in the end?
Imran, it remains to be seen. When we focus on pure numbers, it is not working out. Greece's GDP peaked at 330 billion US dollars in 2009, just ahead of the crisis. And now it's projected at the end of 2017 to be around 200 billion US dollars. And according to the latest research by the Peterson International Economics Institute, an independent think tank in Washington, which is not known for being some kind of lefty liberal outfit, or one of the most serious research institutions on international economics in the world and on pro-market side of things. They are saying that Greece will have 330 billion euro, that's around 400 something billion US dollars in debt, which amounts to 180% of GDP. And unless Greece gets some kind of debt haircut in real terms, then the prospects for growth are bad.
Okay, so Anastasia, more debt is around the corner. It's like, I guess, getting a credit card to pay your mortgage, as some have said. Has it been worth it? I was recently in Greece. So many Greek people told me all this pain, all this suffering in terms of austerity for the bailout money was not worth it. Tell me why you think it was worth it.
I wouldn't say it was worth it. I would say that since 2010, all the previous governments implemented harsh austerity and cuts with no planning and with no long-term planning. I would say that April is really a crucial month for Greece, given the fact that the Greek government is going to to put forward its efforts to conclude the bailout program with a clean exit, with no further measures in August 2018. Although I will have to say that Greek economy seems to have turned a corner. We have finally growth. There was a 1.4% growth in 2017. There has been a primary surplus of 3.5% of the GDP, while the target, the initial target, was 1.75%. Investment is increasing. Unemployment has fallen by 7%, and exports are persistently positive.
Okay.
I would argue that things are going better.
Okay, so let me ask Nikolaos. Nikolaos, has this government handled the situation well, I guess, since 2015? And has the economy turned the corner, as Anastasia claims?
Well, the glass is half full, half empty. I could certainly find lots of areas where things should have been done better. For instance, the sequencing of reforms, I would argue that it should have been more on the product market, strengthening of institutions like facilitating and improving the justice system, the education, and things like that. However, one should make a long list of areas that indicate that Greece is turning a corner. First of all, the famous twin deficits. On the fiscal side, Greece is no longer producing deficits. In fact, it is in primary balance surplus for now 2 or 3 years. The external balance has been fixed, and this has been done without Greece abandoning the euro, which is a very strong currency, so this is helpful for the Greek households. Competitiveness, to a very large extent, has been recovered. Greece grew in real terms about 1.4% last year and is projected to grow at about 2% this year with 0% inflation. Exports are growing.
Okay.
Now, not everything is a rosy picture.
Right.
First of all, there are some legacy issues, meaning the public debt and then private debts. In the end, it has to do with what some people that have been monitoring the Greek programs call ownership. In other words, the extent to which the political system in Greece assumes full responsibility rather than the partners and the debtors imposing the measures.
Right.
To some extent, this has been done, but there is still work to be done.
Anastasia, as we follow the traffic, we're still not seeing people coming back. All we see is 500,000 people who have left, including many, many young professionals who felt this is not for us, austerity is not for us, cut pensions are not for us, depleted education sector, healthcare sector, and so on and so forth. They've left the country, they're not coming back. Is that the ultimate litmus test, that until they start coming back, your country is still an economic basket case?
I would say that the country is getting back to normal. Normal, although, will depend on what's going to happen after August. Today, as we speak, actually, the government will be presenting the first post-bailout era growth plan. The growth plan has 4 different audiences, and its strategy is to reach the institutions, the markets, the creditor states, and Greek society. As far as Greek society is concerned, we're talking about a reconstruction of a social network. We're talking about a rise in the minimum wage and a return of collective bargaining. Of course, it's not a rosy picture, but I think the only way now is upwards for Greece.
So the Troika is still holding on to €1 billion unless final reforms are made as we build up to the summer. I want to go back a little bit. Menelaos Tsafalias, I want you to have a little listen to what Yanis Varoufakis told me a couple weeks ago when I sat with him at his DM25 offices in Athens, near Exarchia. I had a chat to him about that pivotal moment in 2015 when his prime minister decided not to go with the will, or your prime minister as well, decided not to go with the will of the people in that vote and decided to strike a deal with the Troika. Have a little listen to what he had to say.
They freaked out, allow me to use the vernacular. If my prime minister at the time had backed me up, as he was saying he was going to, then we would have changed Europe. Because this extending and pretending would not be plausible anymore, or possible.
So Menelaos, if my prime minister at the time had backed me up, as he was saying he was going to, then we would have changed Europe. Do you believe that?
I have no doubt that would have happened. We haven't seen, since that time, the Greek voters, all Greek voters, essentially adopting this. Because indeed, in the July 2015 referendum, we had an astounding vote in favor of saying no to the proposed program by our official creditors. Mr. Tsipras then going back on what he was pretending to say, at least in public, going ahead with agreeing with his creditors and then winning the elections in the autumn of 2015. But one thing I can definitely vouch for is thanks to Mr. Varoufakis, we have had a glimpse into the workings of the European Union at a deeper level than the usual round of public statements. So now I think we are more savvy about how things work and how we can go about obtaining objectives.
Nikolaos, is that true? Is that accurate, that with Yanis Varoufakis taking on the creditors, it allowed Greek people to be more savvy and to understand their creditors a lot better?
No, I'm sorry, but I have a completely different view on all this. What was being discussed around the summer of 2015 was not right or wrong. It was simply incoherent. And the question that was put in front of the Greek people for the referendum, which was a question, do you want more austerity or? There was no or. So people said, we don't want more austerity, but they had nothing else to choose. In the end, the government and the people chose that they have to be serious, that they don't want to gamble with their country. Everybody knows that Greece has benefited and in the next several decades will benefit from a close relation with Europe. And in fact, the Greek economy in the middle term is going to benefit tremendously from the fact that it did remain in the Eurozone. Now, it is true that in order to remain in the Eurozone, you have to implement and you have to keep implementing the type of structural reforms so that you become a more advanced economy. But this is exactly what Greece needs. It needs an education system that is actually more efficient. It needs a healthcare system that is actually more productive. It needs a justice system that is more transparent. And all of these things are going to bring Greece closer to the core of the European economies. The Greek people are 100% behind this plan. 2015, the summer, was a crazy period as recorded by any numbers. We are all for more transparency in Europe. There have to be transfers from the core to the periphery. However, all this has to be according to some plan, not according to myths.
Nikolaos, let me ask you then. Some people, a lot of people see one of the symptoms of all this austerity over the years was that you now have neo-Nazis in parliament in Greece. Was that a price worth paying?
There are extreme parties in the Greek parliaments, but not to a larger extent than there are to most other European parliaments. It is completely unfortunate, but people vote. It's a democracy. Even if they vote for some such extreme people, I don't like it, but it's part of the game. If you want to look at the whole picture, the truth of the matter is that while you may want to be disappointed in the fact that the political system did not assume responsibility earlier, in other words, in 2008, 2009, 2010, and blamed a lot of the evils to the debtors and the partners, despite that fact, in the end of the day, whenever it was to choose, it took us a long time, it took us 10 years. However, in the end, it looks like things are turning around. It wasn't done in the right way, but at least the Greek economy and the Greek society was not destroyed.
Anastasia, certainly.
But you're absolutely right.
Finish your point, sir. Finish your point.
No, I was just going to say that you're absolutely right that the crisis in Greece was not purely an economic crisis. It had to deal with the political system and the extent that this political system can better integrate Greece into the world economy.
Anastasia, for those people I had spoken to who felt let down by Syriza because Syriza burst onto the scene as anti-Troika, anti-austerity. Prime Minister Tsipras called for that referendum. The people voted in a certain way and he ignored them. For those people who in 2018 feel a sense of regret that they supported Syriza, what's your message to them?
I would say that Syriza is still anti-Troika and still anti-austerity, and the big challenge for Syriza is to show after August 2018 what the party can actually do in order to mend the wounds that the the bailout programs, especially the first two ones that were harsher and full of austerity and full of cuts, with no reason, with no thinking behind them. This is Syriza's challenge, to actually prove them wrong, to actually prove them that it has a growth plan that includes them, a growth plan that will create more jobs, that will reduce even further unemployment, which is still high, despite the fact that it has been reduced by 7%. It will create more jobs, and there will be no more cuts. And of course, there will be a network, a social network for all of them. And it has done so even during these 3 years that under a bailout program that was quite harsh, and the surveillance was quite strict.
Okay, so Menelaos, very finally, is Greek democracy as healthy, as potentially healthy, I guess, and economically potentially good as Anastasia is painting it out to be?
I would say that Greece definitely is turning the corner. We are seeing a slight rise in house prices, for example. There are more people willing to invest in Greece. It's very small, but we are staying there. And what is definite is the political risk of 2015 has been eliminated, for now. The one thing I am not certain at all is this new growth which we've seen in countries, for example, in Margaret Thatcher's Britain, like the IMF was present in the UK in the mid-late 70s, in Turkey in the beginning of the 90s, the late and the early 2000s, and we've seen both economies rebound. What remains to be seen in Greece is who will benefit from this rebound, and whether we will have the kind of social equality that would make this country the paradise that it can be.
Right. Okay. Well, I thank you all for joining us here on The Newsmakers. It's been a great discussion. Menelaos Tsafalias, Anastasia Giamali and Nicholas Vetas, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. And here's a little taste of our documentary, Crossing the Line, Greece's Resilient People. Have a look.
Because when you're bankrupt, you've got to declare your bankruptcy.
Greece is a country still struggling with austerity.
We should protect the people and not only the banks.
Imran Garda reveals the dangerous lengths some Greeks are willing to go.
Η ιδεολογία της Χρυσής Αυγής είναι ο ελληνικός εθνικισμός. Θέλουμε μια Ελλάδα.
And the fears others have for their nation's future. Crossing the Line, Greece's Resilient People on TRT World.
I'm a mother, and I'm a very happy mother, and I'm aware of everything that being a mother entails. My pregnancy, everything I had to give up to give my son the best, in his first months and now in his first year. I always think of how hard and how difficult it must be to do this without wanting to be a mother, and much worse for not wanting to be a mother to leave a boy to the lack of life. I cannot be more in favor of abortion.
We came here today to show the lawmakers who are now meeting in the committee, to show them that there is an important part of society that defends the right of the unborn child and also want to defend women, because we believe that abortion kills a child and destroys a woman.
That's all for this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.